So wonderful to be here with you all again. I'm Athena Alaya, and today I have a very special guest with me, David Zunker, who's a professional astrologer, expert, tarot reader. He has been an avid student and mentor in Hermeticism for 40 years. He is a loving father, wonderful friend, and has also spent his time serving in social services. It's so lovely to have you here today, David.
Thank you very much.
So today we're going to talk about something very interesting. Many of you in our audience are familiar with divination and maybe some of its different forms. Many of you, maybe if you haven't heard the term divination, are at least familiar with the tarot and its uses in fortune telling. But you may be fascinated to find out that the tarot and other forms of divination have deeper, more mystical significance. And today, David and I are going to talk about the power of divination and how you can utilize it to help you to connect with your higher self and utilize that in your path of personal transformation and union with spirit. So, to start off, we'll just start off with a little background in divination in general. So, as I mentioned before, most people are at least familiar with the tarot. So we're going to focus on that primarily today, especially because we have our expert tarot reader with us today. But, if you consider tarot and how it's utilized, and with respect even to other forms of divination, there's a few commonalities. One, you have a tool, in this case, the tarot cards. Two, the reading usually always starts out with some maybe invocation or at least settling the self to get in touch with a higher power. Now, this may be something like your ancestors, that who could be individuals from your familial bloodline or individuals from the culture or maybe a religion that you follow. Some people, will invoke particular deities associated with divination, such as Apollo or Thoth. Others will, utilize this step as a form of mediumship and just allow, whomever the guides are, to come, at that point to them. But what I have found, and in my previous discussions and personal discussions with David, is there's definitely agreement in the esoteric community that the most powerful reason to utilize divination is to get in touch with your higher self. This would be, we call it your true self. Some call it your holy guardian angel, the higher genius. This essentially is that part of you that is always in connection with the divine. And so since the primary act of divination is always get in touch with a higher power, divination can become a very powerful tool in your pathway to ascension, genuineness, getting to know yourself, to allow you to understand deeper powers, connect with that part of you and allow it to always, be a fundamental characteristic of your experience, and then utilize also that connection later as it becomes more and more permanent within your state of consciousness to fulfill your true purpose. And divination can be a great tool, I should say, in all parts of your pathway with respect to gaining guidance and deeper knowledge and understanding of yourself, the world around you, different situations. It's a very handy tool. I always say to people, why sit there and worry about it when you can just look at the cards and find out what's really going on?
Yes.
So David, turning this over to you, You have practiced Hermeticism for over 40 years. You consider yourself, to be a steadfast follower of the goddess energy. Can you kind of give our audience a little bit of your perspective on the uses of the tarot and how it ties into, allowing a person to connect with their higher self?
Sure, happy to. I'd like to kind of touch back, though, when I started in tarot. And at the time, I was in my early 20s. I certainly heard about tarot. I got some tarot cards. I didn't wait for them to be given to me. I went and bought some. Thank you. And by that time, however, I was already well into astrology. I started studying astrology at around age 17. I started meditating at age 15. Had always been sort of had a mystical bent, even as a child. Kind of raised, I call it Catholic light, Lite, and in which my father was Lutheran and agnostic. And so sort of by the time my sister got old enough to kind of go with my mom to church, I got to stay home with dad and watch football on Sundays. So, however, I still went through the catechism classes and had an odd experience during my some odd experiences during the ceremonies there, Catholic business. And but I was, even as a kid, I was felt I was talking to. I heard about guardian angels, and I would chat with my guardian angel. It was cute. And although not, I didn't necessarily see this being kind of in the room with me, but I certainly was imagining it, and that's something we'll get into. Um, but right away, when I started with tarot, I think I had read in some cheesy esoteric book by a fellow named Zohar, little paperback, about creating like a screen, like a movie screen or a TV screen, just kind of a screen in your mind, in your mind's eye. And when doing a reading when using tarot was the context here to look for images, look for things to appear on that screen in your mind. So I think I had the good fortune. I mean, I've since talked to people who find it very difficult to imagine things, to have a images and such in their mind, and they claim to be more driven by words and can see words but not images. And gosh, I think it's a matter of training. Might be a matter of training your mind a bit, but I mean, of course, we can all just close our eyes. I mean, and have a daydream. I mean, if you can't have a daydream, I don't want to say try harder, but maybe try more or try different ways. Um, I've also had some other experiences where that helped me develop that ability to visualize things. So that's very much a part of reading tarot, I think. And for me, it was at the beginning, kind of learning to kind of get images. But at the same time, you're also learning to take on feelings. So, I mean, there's words clairvoyance, clairaudience, hearing, the inner sight. I think, but it's very much about feelings too. The inner being able to sense an emotion. And as a reader, knowing that that isn't necessarily your emotion. That is something you're picking up on.
Well, this is actually a really fascinating topic that you're bringing up, because when people are starting to work with the tarot, you know, I think it's understood on some level that, really working and reading we're really working with and reading the tarot, does correspond to some level of higher intuition. And a lot of people don't really know what that means. They don't really know what that feels like. And they have a particular maybe idea in their head. Or even, prior to that, people just have, all kinds of books where, they do the reading and then they look in the book and this is the interpretation, right? But that the books are training wheels essentially to help you to learn and understand the symbolism. The deeper part of it, the meatier part, of course, is developing those extrasensory perceptions, which, everybody, I think, kind of experiences in a different flavor. Like, for example, I have never had the ability to really see things. I can close my eyes and experience what I would call like an internal scrying, right? So if I'm like scrying into a ball or using the tarot to scry, I it used to be I couldn't just look at the card. I'd have to look at the card and close my eyes, but I didn't have the ability to visualize it, for a long time. And I thought there was something wrong with me. And what I came to find was I was more of a intuitive person. And I also, was more developed in areas such as clairaudience, both externally and internally. And that was how I ended up developing, my connection with my higher intuition. And, everyone is different. Some people get physical sensations. Some people feel emotions more strongly. Some people can see things on the inside. Some people can look just at another person and almost kind of read and scry them. And I've watched, tarot readers look at the card and then look at the person and then look at the card and look at the person. And I think, man, are you just like looking at their body language to see if you can like extract something? Like, are you really a tarot reader? But what I recognized was they were making that connection between the inner part of the person and the card itself. And so you're right. It does take, that takes practice, right? And this, I think, is where the idea of doing, invocations comes in, and why it's so important is because you have to create a space around you that allows you to feel something more than you normally feel. And for those of you who are followers of Hermeticism, you may be familiar with a figure known as McGregor Mathers. What he would say is invoke and invoke often. He said this because the more you invoke, the more you get, you actively try to get in touch with higher energies, the more it elevates your own energy, it purifies your own energy and allows you to become, more sensitive essentially to those energies as you develop over time. So now, going back to you, David, in terms of, the receptivity of that for people, what kind of practices, spiritual, magical, mystical, or otherwise, have you found, maybe aside from something like a active energetic invocation, can help a person to train themselves to become, more sensitive in a safe way, right? I mean, we're not, just to clarify, people, we're not talking like, let's just open yourself up to everything. No, in a safe way, so that they can accurately read what's going on in the cards.
Yes. And certainly that is a good point. I mean, I do practice divination, and I think with astrology too, and there's certainly an intuitive side to astrology as well. And
astrology is also a form of divination, everyone.
and tarot, of course. And but I certainly don't recommend to people that they walk around and through their whole day in in a meditative state, kind of trying to be, in touch with their intuition primarily. I mean, it's good to watch where you're going, you know, in the real world. So um, I talk to people that are developing their personal intuition or getting in tune with their own inner guidance. And I think you'll find in just day-to-day life, I mean, we all have these experiences where, um, it's this little voice told me I should maybe take a different route to work today, and then I didn't listen, and then there's all this construction and I'm late, or like that. Or um, you don't want to be kind of super receptive as you're traveling on the bus and public transportation, because I'm sure there's going to be thoughts and ideas that you don't want anywhere near you, let alone kind of picking up on. So, in which case you might more want to develop methods of psychic self-protection rather than psychic openness. Depends on the situation, of course. Um, but since I've spent many years as a professional reader in various everything from privately to restaurants, and um, I came to I'm not doing any generally when I'm doing a reading in and with the public. I'm not doing some sort of an invocation. It's rare these days that you can be in a public space and even have a lit candle, let alone incense. So what it sort of evolved into is I would have a client and I begin to shuffle the tarot deck, and I tell them, give me a moment. I'm getting myself psyched up. And that is my meditative moment. And that is my kind of invocation. And it's a personal thing to kind of know, okay, I'm focusing now. I'm looking within. I think in general life, though, it's good to note that um, usually it's this soft, quiet voice that is the authentic intuition. Um, you're not getting an inner kind of, it's never demanding. It's never insisting.
Yeah, that's
And if you're dealing with an inner voice that seems demanding or insisting, chances are it's not an authentic guide. Chances are it's not your real intuition.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I have a lot of conversations with people related to, well, how do I really know that this is happening? And before I segue over to that, I just want to quickly point out to the audience that one thing you brought up is, you have to get yourself into a space, right? Now, some people like to create magical spaces, but at minimum, some type of, meditation or, practice, breathing practice, some pranayama or something that centers the consciousness, is definitely key, right? You have to, provide an equilibrated internal landscape so that the symbols and impressions that are coming to you can come to you, in a clear space. And now going back to what you were saying about, like essentially feeling or knowing if it's a real connection. Um, it's certainly not. I'm just going to support your point. It's, when you're receiving a true connection in the spirit from your higher self, there is no signature of attachment, addiction, impulse, right? Like oh, I have to go do this, or like you look at somebody and start feeling really lustful, and there's a part of you that's like, oh, I got to have them, they're meant for me, right? Like that's probably another part of you speaking. the inner voice, it can be felt or heard in different ways. I actually have real conversations with my higher genius in my mind, comes to me as a voice. And when I was developing my relationship with my higher genius, one thing I noted, well, two things I noted is, number one, the higher self is not trying to pull the wool over your eyes. It wants to develop trust with you. It wants you to know that it's a true trusted connection. So it's never going to ask you to do things that are dangerous for you. It might ask you to do things you're uncomfortable with, like say, hey, look, you know what, this job you're working right now it's not for you. You need to let it go. And that might invoke some fear in you about, well, what am I supposed to be doing? Right. But that's a whole lot different than, hey, you know what I think you should do is jump off the roof over there. It's going to teach you humility or something. That's not genuine. It's not going to ask you to harm other people, manipulate other people, right? It's a force of good and balance that's going to speak to you, and it's going to tell you the truth. If you're just starting out reading tarot, you don't have to be reading it for everyone. If you're not feeling confident about your skill yet, you should be spending time doing it for yourself, really seeing what the results of your interpretation are, and then seeing if they're actually true, right? Which could either be that it makes very apparent to you something which you really already knew but didn't want to admit to yourself, or it's telling you something that you didn't know and you see it come true, right? That's how the relationship is established, through trust. And as you establish that, you can think and ask yourself, when I was having this communion with my higher self, what did it feel like? What was it like in my mind, in my heart, in my body? What was the energy like? And then you begin associating the experience that you had with the information and the outcome. And essentially you allow yourself to be what I'll call reconditioned, into that relationship, because the way most of us have lived in society is we've been deconditioned from connection with our higher self. We're told, no, you're hearing this guidance, you're hearing this thing, that's all in your head. Maybe you're crazy. Maybe the devil is in you, right? There's so much stigma that a lot of people have grown up with in terms of, gaining higher awareness or hearing stuff that people, shut down to it. So, just, kind of in summary, before we move along to talk a little bit about the tarot cards specifically, in summary, the act of divination in the steps of, creating a space, an equilibrated space for yourself internally, an active method of invocation or prayer, or something that allows you to get in touch with your guides or your higher self, and then letting yourself learn to become aware of the experience and see that the outcome is true, and if it's not, continuing on until you start seeing results, is all very important to not only becoming an intuitive reader and an expert reader like David over here, but also to recognizing when your higher self or another guide that you're working with is really coming through, and that it's a genuine connection. So now to move on to another relevant topic related to this. In the mystical and esoteric arts, there's another name for the tarot. It's known as book T. And many people believe that, the tarot cards, very similar to the Vedas in India and many other mystical texts, was essentially received by people who were in a state of unity consciousness or high awareness, that the T in book T may be related to Thoth or Hermes Trismegistus. There's a lot of legend around it. But one core component for many followers of the tarot is that within the entire set of tarot, there's a story. And as this story unfolds, essentially within, encompassed within all of the tarot cards together, is the manner by which a person can achieve what some would call the great work. And the great work I'll define as not only achieving what we would call the knowledge and conversation with your higher self, which we just touched on, that true communion with your higher self, but then integrating, unifying, and then utilizing that to achieve your true purpose in this life or all of your lives together. So, you know, going back then to the specificity of the cards, and we could talk, whatever you like to talk about. I'm talking about the major arcana, all of the cards, the path of the fool. I mean, I really want to leave this open for you to kind of relay your wisdom on how the symbolism that exists within the tarot, how it is relevant to the great work, and how people may be able to utilize that symbolism in their path of transformation and unification.
Sure. Yes. Just to touch on, if I look into tarot these days on social media, or whether it be TikTok or Instagram, et cetera, even. But there seems to be a large portion of people that are involved or express an interest in tarot seem to really prefer the academic perspective on the origins of tarot. I'm kind of done arguing. Some people prefer the academic perspective on tarot, that it started as a card game in the 1400s in Italy or such. That a lot of people use tarot
Your
and
camera, Dave.
oh, sorry.
No worries.
as a they talk about tarot as a psychological tool, rather than having it linked to spirituality and mysticism. And that's great. I mean, at least they're interested in it, and they're reading books, hopefully. But myself, I prefer the more mystical and esoteric descriptions of tarot. I learned about the origins of tarot primarily through the builders of Aditum, BOTA, and Rosicrucianism. And I had a teacher as well who, her own opinion was, granted, an opinion, I'm not saying this is the case, but the opinion that tarot was developed in the 900s in Fez, Morocco, where there was a universities and a very secular society for a while. And Hebrew mystics were developing the Kabbalah, and that this is the origins of the tarot. So let's just leave it open. I don't want to. My own opinion is it's kind of wacky.
The history, essentially, of the tarot.
Origins of tarot. I like more the idea that it's coming from Thoth. I like the idea that it's coming from ancient Egyptian mysteries that are probably coming from Atlantean mysteries, and that. And then, of course, we have the whole biblical story of Moses being found in the reeds as an infant by the Egyptian royal family. So what do you think an Egyptian adopted child is going to be doing in the royal family in ancient Egypt? Well, he doesn't get to be pharaoh because he's adopted, but I'm sure he's initiated into the Egyptian priesthood.
He took another great path.
So, hence you get this biblical stories of turning the rod into a snake and kind of making these kind of miracles happen. Well, part and parcel with being an initiate in the Egyptian priesthood, I would suppose. But so as far as that, I really do recognize and work with in very direct ways the links in the tarot to the Kabbalah, whether that's with a K or with a Q.
Another
And
argument that's unnecessary.
yes, and that in fact, I have taught tarot to the public, and then when I had people going from my classes going, well, we want level 2, we want level 2. Level 2 was instruction in the Kabbalah and using that for path working on the tarot, and basically learning the tarot from the tarot in path working meditations.
So
So
just real quick for the audience,
yeah,
maybe some of you are unfamiliar with the term Kabbalah. Kabbalah would be the mystical component of Judaism, just like Rosicrucianism is the esoteric component of Christianity. So some refer to it as mystical Christianity. And Sufism is another example, would be the mystical component of Islam. So almost every exoteric tradition has an esoteric tradition. So what Dave is referring to is the Kabbalah in terms of the mystical Judaism and its wide incorporation into the tarot, especially if you've practiced Hermetic paths, Rosicrucian paths, the type of tarot decks that are utilized have a heavy emphasis on Kabbalistic symbolism.
yes. Just to personalize it a little more, just calls to mind. I was a student in North Vancouver, British Columbia, at this Capilano College, and had moved to North Van to take courses there. I happened to see this because I had already been a little bit interested in working with tarot. And I saw that there was a little fellow had a little office in the bottom of an apartment building, and it said he was doing tarot reading. So I thought, hey, I'm gonna get a tarot reading from somebody that maybe knows what they're doing. Anyways, the person told me some very specific things about what are you driving this big white van for, and you don't want to buy a big white van. And then a couple months later, I'm driving a big white van for this job I had taken. But he mentioned, well, if you're interested in tarot, look into the Kabbalah. And that's what started me on that direction.
Well, we're starting to get close to about an hour in our podcast. It's always so fun, so it seems to go so quickly sometimes. But hopefully the audience today has been able to gain an understanding that there's a deeper reason behind the manner by which the tarot exists. So, there's always discrepancies between academia and the esoteric arts. Of course, in academia, there isn't the leverage or flexibility to be able to really talk about spiritual or esoteric topics. Usually, most academic, institutions are secular. And, but in terms of what the spiritual traditions, understand the tarot to be as a mechanism that allows a person, to get in touch with their higher self, and to formulate a relationship with it that allows for a conversation to occur. And that's exactly what's happening when you're reading. You are receiving messages from a higher plane, whether that's from your higher self or a guide or a god or goddess, or your ancestors, or any other number of entities a person may choose to work with, depending on their particular spiritual bent or tradition, and translating that into recognizing what the symbols on the card are and formulating an interpretation, right? So the symbols act as a way essentially to stimulate the higher levels of consciousness within a person. And so one can receive a message, and then one would utilize that message, to gain a deeper understanding of themselves, to interact and make choices maybe in the world, to give another person guidance. This is sometimes, more related to the fortune telling aspect of it, but, it shouldn't be overlooked that it's the connection that's occurring as we perform divination, whether it's through tarot or any other means like astrology, hydromancy. There's literally hundreds, maybe even thousands of divination techniques that have been developed over time, but it's that which we would consider to be the most important aspect of it. And while we're getting close to an hour now, we'll have to sign off soon. Some other, I think, very important topics for future podcasts that have been touched on are, things like path working. We didn't really get into path working, but path working is, what I would consider to be an active meditation, utilizing a tarot card to unlock its deeper mysteries, as well as to do things like travel up the tree of life, which is a concept in the Kabbalah that David was just talking about. It's utilized as a method of transformation. So as you delve into the card, you can, I'm going to revisit that statement. The delving into the card function would be more of a scrying. So what I said was inaccurate. The utilization of the card to travel through different spheres on something like the Tree of Life, which is a map of the universe, is utilized to enhance a spiritual transformation within a person as they move from one state of consciousness to another. Because in general, as you're moving from one sphere to another, you're going up, and therefore you're elevating. I think it'd be really wonderful to have a whole podcast on just path working and the major arcana, which are the main cards that are utilized in path working. And I'd love, maybe even to have another podcast at some point where we talk about the sub arcana, and then relay some techniques to the audience, on how they can utilize techniques related to the tarot aside from divination to achieve higher states of consciousness and understand the tarot better, for their own personal readings. So, just gave a brief summary there. You kind of blipped off for a second into the void, but now you're back. Do you have any final thoughts or words of wisdom?
Yeah,
Anything
some
for
a
the
little
audience?
kind of summary, if I could kind of leave audience members with something practical. And when I reflect back on my own path as a reader, and certainly tarot was instrumental in guiding me, not that I knew it at the time, but onto my path of spiritual discovery and growth, I'd like to think. And so I would suggest to people that are getting involved or interested in tarot to, yes, part of it is rote. Please read some books about it. Please kind of, even the little pamphlet, and start somewhere. You have to start somewhere. Um, a good little tool is maybe at the start of your day, choose, give them a shuffle and choose, say, randomly. It's all about the random because there's no such thing. So choose three cards randomly and say that with the context that my day ahead, and then jot them down in your little notebook. And then you can reflect later in the evening or before you go to bed that, okay, well, these were my cards for the day. How might they apply? How might I might interpret them in the knowledge of what I went through and what I experienced today? And that this is a good way to really begin to learn how to apply the cards to the daily life of a human on planet Earth and kind of a Western culture. So just kind of to give yourself that, develop that understanding. And
Love that, by the way. Can I just clarify that technique and make sure I heard
sure,
it correctly for the audience? So your suggestion would be sometime in the morning after you wake up, probably to, center yourself, do an invocation or prayer, then shuffle the cards, ask me a question for the day, or leave it open-ended. Maybe what's the message for me today? Pull one card, consider it as symbolism, maybe what it means, to you with the frontal lobe kind of analytical portion, and then just let that go for the day, go about your day. And then sometime in the evening, pick that card back up and then reflect on your day and see how the activities, the experiences, the interactions, etc., that you had relate back to that card. Did I get that? Did I get that?
yes,
Okay.
yes,
I love
that's
that.
the
I
gist
love
of it.
that.
And once when you really want to try doing a reading for someone, you know, I would suggest that you use some sort of a format that is spelled out. This position means this and that. The Celtic cross is a good starter, but there's other maybe more simple ones that can be found. And so that there's a structure to the reading. And I would suggest you find a friend. Personally, after many years, I mean, I find it much easier to read for someone else than I do for myself.
I've heard a lot of people
Um,
say that actually. We're too
uh,
hung up on our own stuff, right?
yeah, and our own expectations, but I think it really will to help people develop skills to have a couple, you know, to start by reading for people in person, because that's the way you're going to really develop your intuition, because it has a whole nother soul's spirit and soul right there with you. I just think it has a different quality than, not that you can't do this online. You can do this online. I do it online. But I think there's another level of learning and receptivity that takes place when it's human beings together. And
Two or more gathered in my name. There I will.
so, and then also, in my working with tarot in at like psychic fairs and such, which are very common where I live, um, there's you're always chatting with other readers and their perspectives, and so many of them say, "Oh, my guides," or "this guide," or "that guide," and that's just something you may or may not develop. It may be there for you. I don't think it is necessary. It's not something I really was ever involved in or concerned about. I think overall in my esoteric work and mystical practice, yes, spiritual practice, I have met guides. I have um, found guides. I may work with guides. I have met ancestors. I may work with ancestors. Um, in fact, after doing tarot for about a dozen years for the public, just started one day saying, I think I have a message from a dear departed. And I would describe a person's kind of personality and maybe some imagery and kind of give them, well, I think this person was maybe on the prairies in the 1830s or something. And, they may say, oh, yes, well, that might be blah, blah, blah. Or they may just draw a blank, but doesn't matter. I mean, I would eventually, but this goes to what we are speaking about as it was part of my own development, through the practice that I was able to kind of get my awareness into a space where I was able to um, be aware or connect with the ancestors of others. So, so where is that on the ladder? It's a little above just snooping through the astral level for some imagery or feelings for the client. It's kind of a little further up the paths to somewhere where um, these souls reside.
Well, that's
So
lovely. We
it's
should probably jump off here.
yes.
Because I think we may as well do a 2-hour episode if we keep going. This is how David and mine's conversations always are. We have a hard time getting off, but just to, just as a closing, I guess, kind of point back to David, something that he mentioned was, part of this process is being brave. It's being courageous, right? If you're reading the tarot for another person, just say what comes to your mind and don't worry about if it makes sense to you. It's a message for them, and sometimes it may resonate with them in the moment, and sometimes it may resonate with them a little bit later on, but just guide your client or your friend or whomever to just keep an open mind. And if you're really kind of nervous about reading tarot for people, initially, one thing I can say is don't approach it seriously, meaning, be at your friend's house. Oh, hey, I got this tarot deck. Can I do a reading for you? Make it just like it's fun. It's like entertainment or whatever. So there's no expectation on the other end that you're gonna, bring these huge revelations, right? It takes a lot of the pressure off. And then as you gain confidence, it'll be more like, oh, you need to have a reading with so-and-so because they're so good, blah, blah, blah. Right. So just don't get stressed out about it, worried about it. Right. Everything you learn is a skill. It's a process. And there's many benefits to it with respect to your personal development. So on that note,
Certainly.
thank you so much, David, for joining me today. Thank you for sharing your wonderful experiences about your path. I know, for myself, being able to hear about, the experiences of others helps me to understand my own experiences more. It helps me to understand myself more, as well as key similarities and differences in the various ways to practice, maybe even very similar paths. Today, you mentioned that you find more value in reading for other people. Whereas, for me, I felt like doing it for myself for a good period of time early on before moving on to others, really helped. So that's you got to do it what works for you out there, right? Don't be afraid to, do a little experimentation and see what works for you. Experiment with different maybe guides or deities if that resonates with you. Work with just connecting with your higher self and seeing what that feels like, if that's the pathway you want to take, right? It all ends up at the mountain is wide at the bottom, but it's all the same at the peak. Okay. So just go forth in love, truth, and knowledge. And yeah, if you have any experiences you want to share, audience, you have any feedback, if there's anything related to the tarot you want to hear more about, drop your comments, down below. And also please like, subscribe, follow us. And also don't forget to follow David Zunker on Facebook and social media, professional astrologer, expert tarot reader. He's got a lot of wisdom to bestow. So I hope you all have a beautiful day. May you be blessed with peace and wisdom. Love you, fam.
Let the be. Thank you.